Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and this is Kairos Fateweaver, famously known as the turkey who gets DP'd by, well, a elf nerd and lizard Rambo. Kairos' campaign has always been a subject of contempt with the Total War fanbase, as he is a really interesting character, one of the more interesting demon legendary lords, but the problem is that, yeah, he doesn't really do too well, which is actually kind of surprising considering that his star position is actually quite good. It's just you're surrounded by two very powerful enemies and they will cause you problems likely at the very same time. The harder the difficulty, the more of the chance that they'll both strike out to you literally within around 15 turns or so. Now, Tzeentch has actually received a decent amount of attention over the small time that we've had Total War Warhammer 3, a few changes here and there, and obviously the Warriors of Chaos DLC Champions of Chaos finally gave Tzeentch a front line. The problem is that those units are fairly expensive, which means that when you're dealing with two very strong factions recruiting very strong units very early on, you're always going to be at a bit of a negative, and it does very much show when you're dealing with these two. Again, there's nothing really wrong with Kairos or the Tzeentch Monogod standard faction. I have to stay standard now, as obviously we know that the Changeling is quite different, but yeah, it does become a bit of an issue, especially with those people who are massive Tzeentch fans and want to expand a bit. Obviously, it's not as bad as Kurgaf and the Nurgle faction, but we're getting Thrones of Decay later on, and hopefully that fixes up a few issues for our good buddy. But Shadows of Change is bringing in something that is going to help Kairos be less soul-sucking, and I think that's the most important thing to talk about right now, rather than being overwhelmingly negative about the current situation. So let's talk about how the DLC actually does benefit him. So as you're aware, Kairos starts off with a tier 2 settlement, which is actually fairly decent, mostly because you start off with the building already for the horrors, so you can start progressing to recruit some pink horrors by turn 3, but also since you can build up the building with the Chaos Warriors, right? That's the building chain that starts off at tier 2, which allows you to recruit Marauders and Forsaken at tier 2, which means that by tier 3 you're able to get some Forsaken. The only problem is that they're fairly expensive and they're not really good at taking the brunt of damage despite being Forsaken of Tzeentch. Well, the Zangors are now tier 2 too. And yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people might not be too impressed by this, but the Zangors themselves prove to be one of the most cost-effective units early game because they're already quite strong as they are. They are very comparable to that of Chaos Warriors more than Forsaken, because stat-wise, while they are a little bit worse than the Forsaken, you do get access to shield, you do get access to Vanguard, so already they're going to be providing a very good front line for you, much better than a Marauder. It makes the Marauders pretty redundant, barring the spear ones early on at least. And you can actually improve them with skill points. They are actually working skill points. I've tested it. So already you're going to have a really good front line to protect your horrors. Your pink horrors are going to be perfectly fine, because even though the pink horrors and the blue horrors are decent, the blue horrors themselves are pretty much just a tar pit, and the pink horrors can be a little bit squishy, especially when overwhelmed. Arrows will rip them apart, so having some shields at the very beginning, at front, is going to be very good, especially when you've got decent stats involved. There's not a lot of text to improve them, but you do have access obviously to the first tech, which increases their armor by 10, already being better than the Forsaken by turn 5, and you'll start recruiting them by around turn 3, so yeah, this is actually fairly decent. With the skill points themselves working as intended, which is always something to be worried about when a new patch drops, everything is looking quite good. You can make them pretty terrifying, increasing their speed, increasing their damage output, and making a unit that you'll be able to have for a long time of your campaign. We're going to be talking about later campaign a little bit later on, so yeah, quite happy about this. And I know a few people have been wondering, I'm not sure if other creators have shown it, but you'll be able to get the Cockatrice at tier 3, the same building chain that allows you to pick up the Soul Grinder, so it's something that you're naturally going to go through, and the Mutilar Vortex Beast is available at tier 5, which is understandable considering that it is actually very, very strong, but it's the same building that you'll be getting your Screamers from, your Flamers, and all that type of stuff. The Cockatrice being at tier 3 is also wonderful considering that it's got some pretty nasty debuffs, so you're already going to be getting them very early on. They do take about 2 turns to recruit though. So this is a product of a recent stream of mine, only 100 turns in, as I was streaming it yesterday on twitch.tv/thegreatbookofgrudges. You should pop by if you want to. We'll also be continuing this campaign today, as Mother Stanka's release is tomorrow, and very early on did I get rid of the Oxyotl issue, and obviously Teclis. Oxyotl is also a character that you'll want to get rid of anyway very early on, because the quest chain for revolving around the blue scribes is tied to his main city. But this is actually very good progress, considering that as you start landing into the areas where Teclis is, when you start pushing Teclis back, you'll start dealing with, well, Tic-Tac-Toe, you'll be dealing with the other minor lizardmen faction there, you've got Krokkar, you've got pretty much any faction that has around -100 aversion to you, which is pretty much, well, most of the factions in Total War Warhammer. So this actually does mean that you're going to have a nice little push forward. You're still going to be using them. I'm still using them at this point, where I'm attacking and just pushing onto multiple grounds. I'm actually fighting Forik, I'm fighting Volkmar, who's got just a few areas left, and obviously we've got Rapance on her way down. I've already taken out the majority of the Lizardmen factions in this area too. It's actually really amazing to see how factions can change and get a lot better with the addition of maybe 1 or 2 basic units. It does make Kairos feel a lot better. The Changeling doesn't have this problem because the Changeling himself, it's pretty much next to impossible to actually lose as him, whereas Kairos, you know, you are surrounded. You are always going to be a target, and obviously player bias comes into effect over here. I must say I had a lot more fun. This is basically a regular composition for an army that I do have when it comes to the battles. Obviously a bit less than usual because this is custom battles, and to keep things fair, there is a cash limit because the custom battles themselves are not like the actual campaign battles. But I must say this is a fairly good improvement. Kairos now doesn't feel like he's soul-sucking anymore, so I am very, very happy. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. We'll start a bit of discussion. Again, I'll be streaming this, I believe around the same time that this video goes live. And yeah, I'll see you all again very, very soon, guys. Have a good day. I'll also let the rest of the battle play out so you can actually see that the Zangors actually hold out quite well. Fighting against some Norskins, they are obviously going to be very, very strong. A lot of them do have anti-armor, but yeah, quite pleased with the results.
Fly!